So keep in mind when you go live, everything, including what's now, will be replayable until you turn it.
Okay. Okay. So
keep in mind when you go live, everything, including what's now, will be replayable.
Okay.
Until you turn it.
Okay. So the meeting is being live streamed. Okay.
Okay, so just send me that YouTube ending and you're good to go.
I'm going to send you the whole thing because I'm not sure where to cut it off.
Yep.
Come on. Okay, pasting. Hold on. Okay. Okay. So I just sent you the YouTube link.
Yep.
Okay.
I just updated it. So now you're live.
Okay. I still need to put myself on my phone on Zoom here.
But yeah, your meeting is good to go and it is streaming now live.
Okay. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I still need to put myself on my, okay, hang on.
And it is streaming now live. Yep.
Okay. Almost there, Andrew, sorry.
Okay, we're good.
Vladimir, how do I, okay, I think, how do I make my phone video work, but turn off my laptop video?
I don't know.
Okay.
I guess.
I think I can.
Yeah, you have to play with the settings. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Let's see.
Oh, like turn on. Oh, I get what you're saying. You right click on one of the videos and it'll let you hide from user.
Right. Oh. Okay. Is the audio working? Let's see.
I do hear everything fine on the live link.
Okay.
And I see people watching. There's like 10, 20 people.
Okay, great. Hey folks, sorry for the technical difficulties. Almost there. Just give me one more minute and we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't already,
Andrew, can you hear me?
I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say if you guys haven't weighed out 10 grams of each of the coffees and gotten them ready to grind, Scott and I have ours ready. We'll grind once we get started. But if you guys want to, you can barely hear me. Okay, let me turn up. You can hear me okay, right, Scott?
Okay. Yeah. The Cupwise link, Vladimir, I think I might. Okay. Okay.
I just sent you the 2 links for the normal and scoring book.
Okay. Are you able to see in Cupwise whether whether one of me is showing or 2 of me is showing?
Just one of you is showing in Cupwise. You're good.
I see the one that's probably from your phone.
Okay, so you see the table, but you don't see.
I see the table. I see Andrew. I hear.
Okay. I don't hear Andrew.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can
whether
hear Andrew well on the line, and now there's 2 of you, Scott.
Oh, that's not good. Okay.
But it's kind of cool too.
No, it's not cool. How do I get rid of the second me?
You just I think you right click it and press hide. I guess.
I'm lost. Okay.
So
I need
the window that you want to hide. Can you right click it, or will it show you?
I don't see where that is. I don't see how
Yeah, Scott,
okay,
can you just turn off the video on the other one?
I'm almost a few seconds behind, I think, on this.
Yep. So. Yep. I'm hoping I disappear in about a second on your end.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, good. Thank God. Okay, Andrew, so please say something so I can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Nope, still don't hear Andrew.
Everyone else can hear me, right? I heard at least one or two comments that people could hear me, so. Can you hear me now?
Okay, why I can't hear him.
Maybe because I'm on the phone.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I guess, Vladimir, if you don't mind getting off, and I might just text you if I have a problem. Thank you, man. Okay. Andrew, say something.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, can you hear me?
I still don't.
Oh,
finally. Okay.
Yes, I finally hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes. So sorry for the
technical problems. I do have a bit of an echo, though. So
yeah, I still see your second one on.
You do.
On Zoom, not on YouTube.
Not on YouTube? How about on Cupwise?
But maybe on the Zoom one you can mute the other one, if that's
Can you view the Cupwise link?
Yeah, I don't have the Cupwise link going.
Oh, you gotta have that for the scoring and the text chat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm on that link. I'm saying I don't have that audio going.
No, that's good. You shouldn't have the audio going. But what you should see is only two of us on the Cupwise.
Correct, but I think the audio on your second one on Zoom is causing the echo.
Okay. Yes, you're right.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, I think it's much better now.
All right, I'm very sorry for that. This is technological stuff is not my strength.
That's all right. Hey,
and it's a little bit confusing. Vladimir built this cupping software, and we need to be simultaneously using it and Zoom and YouTube, and even he sometimes forgets the order of how to set everything up. So, okay. So, hi to everyone who's watching. I apologize for the delay. My name is Scott. Thanks for being here. Andrew, nice to see you.
Yes, I'm Andrew from Poolcore, obviously. Scott, the head of Prodigal, a lot of other things. Most of you guys probably know him. Yeah, so we got the 3 coffees today that we featured in the set, 3 different Columbia washed coffees. Scott, I'll kind of let you take lead, and I'll jump in if there's questions I see or any comments.
Yeah, totally. So we're going to be cupping these 3 coffees. One is a washed geisha called El Cairo. One is a churroso called Ruby, which is a project with a relatively well-known producer named Wilder Lazo. And one is a pink bourbon called Darwin from a friend of ours called Juan Medina. And we'll get to the coffees in a bit, but what I'd like to do is talk about the cupping setup, make sure that everybody's got all their stuff in order. So if you haven't already, please start your kettle so that you bring your water to a boil. If your water is hot, just go ahead and flick the kettle back on again. You're going to need at least about 3/4 of a liter of water, 3/4 of a quart. And hopefully you have 3 cupping bowls or glasses. Regardless of what size cup you use, ideally you use a digital scale and you do about a 17:1 ratio of water to grounds. So what that means, like for me, I've got the Barista Hustle cupping bowls, and I've got 10 grams of coffee in each of these bowls. And when we get going, eventually I'm going to pour about 170 grams of water over the grounds. So we'll be using a grind setting that's a little bit finer than what you might use for a V60 or a Kalita. So let's say you have a grinder with settings 1 to 10 and you use number 6 for your V60, try using number 5 for cupping. It's not very picky. You don't have to worry if you're on precisely the perfect grind setting, but if you're anywhere in the ballpark of slightly finer than pour over, you'll be in good shape. Let's see what else. You'll need a couple of spoons. Ideally, you'll need a cup with some water in it with a couple of spoons so that you can rinse the spoons. And if you don't want to swallow too much coffee, having a spit cup on the side is helpful. And we're going to be cupping in the order from left to right, El Cairo, Ruby, and Darwin. If you look at your Cupwise screen, you should see kind of a aroma, acidity, sweetness balance, and then there's something at the bottom called My Descriptors. And when we get going, you'll be able to enter your own scores and tasting notes, and I'll walk you through how to do that. This is not a serious thing. It's more of a game. It's more for fun and just for educational purposes here. Andrew, tell me, do you have everything? And if anybody watching doesn't have all the things we just talked about, feel free to text if you have any questions or concerns.
Yeah, I don't have any. I have my coffee ready to go. I just need to grind it, and the water's hot. So,
yep. Okay. Great. So, what I'd like to do, since cupping takes a little bit of time, since we have to let the coffee cool and such after we pour it, what I'd like to do is just make sure reboil your water, and let's go ahead and grind. When you grind, what I suggest is you take a small handful, perhaps 10, 15 beans, purge your grinder with that handful. In other words, just grind it and waste that little bit of coffee. And then go ahead and grind your 10 or 12 or however many grams of a given bowl, and then move on to the next coffee, do a purge with that coffee. And the idea here is that grinders retain a little bit of grounds from the previous coffee, and the purge helps flush that out so you get a more pure cup of just the coffee you're trying to get.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna mute myself as I start grinding so I don't.
Okay. Yeah, sure thing. I can't. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and grind. So we'll just reconvene here in about 1 minute.
All right, I'm set.
Okay, I just finished grinding as well. Oh, let me. I think if anybody is having trouble, like go ahead and try try to move the sliders in the scoring area at the bottom of the screen. If you're having trouble with that, there. Okay, Andrew, can you move the sliders? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, if you have trouble with it, just go ahead and refresh the screen. Okay, and then that usually solves it because mine was locked, but now it's unlocked. Okay, so my water just boiled. Andrew, is your water boiled?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
Okay, and folks at home, if you're behind by 30 seconds or something, don't worry. There's no panic. We're going to have a little bit of downtime here after pouring the water. Okay.
So are you pouring already?
I am pouring now, and I'm going to set a timer on my oven here for 13 minutes, so we'll know when to begin slurping. Okay, and then while we let the coffee cool, we can talk about the coffees. We can talk about cupping.
If you haven't started pouring, give the coffee, the dry grounds, a little bit of a sniff because they smell amazing. All right.
Alrighty, so we've got a fair bit of time here, so we can talk about a few things. When we break the crust in a few minutes, it's a great time to get a sense of the aroma of the coffee, because when the coffee's hot, the aromatic release is pretty potent, and when you move the grounds away to break the crust, you get probably the most potent release of aroma that you can get during cupping. Okay, what should we talk about first? Let's talk about the cupping process so everybody's prepared.
Okay.
When we cup, what we're doing is we're using a simple, universal way to taste coffee that doesn't depend on skill in brewing, doesn't depend on the device that you're using. It's pretty foolproof. And this method of cupping is something people use everywhere in the world, whether it's at roasteries or coffee farms or importers' offices. It's so simple and it just works because you don't have to worry about channeling. You don't have to worry about did I pour properly and whatnot. You almost don't have to worry that much about grind setting being precise. So cupping makes it really easy to evaluate a coffee without the noise that comes from brewing skill or brewing device and all the complexity that can come from that. The phases of cupping at about 4 minutes, we're going to break the crust and smell the coffee. We're going to, after we break all 3 crusts, we're going to remove the crusts in order to kind of get the slime off the top and let the coffee cool further. And then at about 13 minutes, the coffee will be cool enough to slurp without it hurting our mouths. And what we'll do is we'll take the spoon, we'll hold our head upright, which is pretty important, rather than leaning forward. And we're going to slurp forcefully. And the idea is that will break the coffee up into lots of little droplets. And the more droplets you break it up into, the more surface area is generated. And the more surface area, the more aroma gets released. So the idea of slurping and spraying the coffee all throughout your mouth is a way of giving you the greatest sensorial impact. You'll get the most aroma release. You'll get the biggest impression of the coffee by doing it that way. So any questions on that, Andrew? Anything you think you want to add or that people need to know?
No, I think that's yeah. I think that makes sense. I mean, I think not only the cooling part, I think is, and you kind of mentioned in some of your notes, is like even after 13 minutes, and we'll continue to try it. It evolves kind of in our taste buds.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So we'll slurp at about 13, 14 minutes. We'll talk a little bit, and then we're going to slurp again when the coffee's cool, which is what you're referring to. And when it comes to defects, when it comes to certain types of flavors, some things are more obvious when the coffee's hot, and some things are more obvious when the coffee's cool. So when we, for instance, cup coffee to decide which green to buy, we're very careful about all the phases, the aroma, the hot, and the cold, because every one of them has a chance of telling us something usually problematic that maybe wasn't obvious in another phase. So we've hit 4 minutes. So what I'd recommend is to break the crust, just take your spoon and use the back of the spoon to push, if there is crust, to push the crust away from you, and then get your nose as close to the coffee as possible. Don't be afraid to churn the coffee. You can go ahead and stir it a little bit, especially bringing grounds up from the bottom.
Yeah, and Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about why some coffees have crust and some don't? Because I've heard.
Yeah, so it's
like
the amount of crust you get is a combination of 3 things: water chemistry, which is perhaps the least important of the 3 things; roast level, which is very important; and grind setting. So the finer you grind, the more crust you will get, and the darker the roast, the more crust you will get. And what both of those things have in common is grinding finer and roasting darker both create faster and more aggressive degassing. So the more the coffee is degassing, the more crust will form, because the crust is a combination of grounds, carbon dioxide, water, and oils. And it's the more gas that you create, the more stuff will float on top of the cup. So for instance, if you were to do a cupping with a coffee from Starbucks, the crust would be incredibly thick. And with these coffees, at least where I am with my water, most of my crusts have already broken themselves. These are very light roasts, and we're using kind of a medium grind. So the crusts sink pretty easily with these coffees.
Yes, and that's what I think. I'd heard that previously, that like you don't get a crust if the coffee is super stale, which maybe has something to do with the CO2. But I find more the roast level is really the indicator. And a lot of the coffees that I cup that are super light roasted, they don't end up having much of a crust. And for a while, a while ago, I was like, oh man, these are all stale. And that's not the case. For these, that's not the case. It's really just more of the roast level.
Right. So you are correct that it does have to do with CO2. So when coffee gets old, it has lost a lot of aroma and it's lost a lot of CO2. And so what we're talking about is age will decrease the crust because you've lost CO2. Light roasting will decrease the crust because there's not as aggressive degassing, because the cellulose structure of the coffee is tougher. And lighter roasts won't have as much crust. Sorry, I apologize. Grinding coarser won't have as much crust because you have more intact cells, so the gas can't escape from those cells.
Yep.
So yes, it's all about the CO2. So okay.
Yeah, and then do you want to maybe talk, like, so would you would do the aroma score now, or do you wait until you taste it?
I would take some notes on aroma. So like I wrote down a couple of words for number 1, just working on cup number 2 now. Okay. So you have the opportunity in the Cupwise software to add descriptors. And when you add a descriptor, sometimes depending on the browser you're using, either you need to hit the plus sign or hit enter. You may or not have to delete the words each time you want to add a new descriptor. In other words, you might enter one, hit the plus sign, and then you might have to delete the letters that you just wrote in order to create a new one. It depends on your browser. Sometimes it's a little bit wonky depending on the browser. Okay. And there's no hurry, but whenever you are done with the breaking the crust and smelling the wet aroma, ideally you take 2 spoons, you put each spoon halfway into the bowl such that you're at sort of the equator of each spoon's bowl, and then you pull the spoons towards you so that you can catch whatever sludge is on top of the cups. So in this case, there's not much because all the coffees, at least for me, the crust broke themselves. So there's not that much to take off. But it's always nice to clean the top. If you have any oily residue on top, one little professional trick is you can take the spoon right side up, put the bottom of the spoon bowl just gently on the surface and swirl it around, and the bottom of the spoon will attach itself to all the little oily, gassy droplets. That's like the final step of cleaning cupping bowls. Little magic trick. Okay.
Yeah, I've not done that before.
So someone asked, how do I put how much I like the smell or how strong the smell is? So there's the aroma category. So you could consider aroma intensity to be part of how high you want to score the aroma. You could also add in the descriptor box, you could say intense aroma or something like that, or low intensity. So the scoring in this, it's very loose. There's no rhyme or reason to it. All I ask is that if everyone at home is internally consistent in the sense that, like, if cup 1 has the most acidity and 2 has the middle and 3 has the least acidity, then just score it in that order. Doesn't matter whether you give it 10, 9, 8 or 9, 8, 7. What matters is in the end, what's going to happen is we're going to average all the scores and we'll get a sense of how everybody felt about the coffees on a relative basis. Okay. So I would say, 10 out of 10 just means, oh my God, I love this. I'm going to remember this experience of this flavor for a long time. 7 out of 10 is okay, not that exciting, not terrible, just boring. And then 8, 9 is various levels of enthusiasm. Ideally, though, the descriptor box, I think, becomes kind of the interesting part at the end when we reveal all the scores. Okay, so we are 30 seconds away from slurping. I'm sorry?
That went fast. That 13 minutes went fast.
I'll tell you. Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. And then after we slurp and after we do a little scoring and note-taking, I'll tell you a little bit about the coffees, and I'll share my flavors. I'll ask Andrew about his, and anybody from home who wants to. At that point, once we've all slurped a bit, if you want to make any comments, you're welcome to. But we generally consider cupping something to be done blindly and without bias. So like when I cup with my partner Mark, like we don't really talk till we've slurped and taken notes and stuff. This way we don't influence each other's perceptions. When you slurp, it's not necessary to fill the bowl of the spoon completely. Some people, at least like myself, I find if I overfill the spoon, I have a little bit of a restriction in my throat. Like I almost fear choking on the coffee. So I find it a little bit easier to just take a very small amount on the spoon, like maybe half, and then I try to slurp it as forcefully as possible into my mouth. And you might swish it around in your mouth a little bit. You might spit it out or swallow it. It would be great if you could swallow one spoonful of each coffee at some point, because sometimes the impression you get when you swallow is a little bit different than when you get just by slurping and spitting.
Scott, after you try them all, you kind of put, I think, one of your notes that I shared with people, but just kind of talk about when you have a lineup of coffees, how you approach it, like doing all one or kind of go down the line and go back. Just some thoughts around that.
Right, right. So what I recommend is take 1 or 2 or 3 slurps of a coffee, focus really hard on that coffee, take some notes, do the same then for each coffee. And then once you've done all 3, feel free to go back and forth and say, all right, which one has the most acidity? Oh, okay, which one has the most aroma? Like you can kind of do a free form comparison once you've given each coffee a fair amount of focus on its own. I just realized I totally apologize. I put my own. Which order do you have the bowls in, Andrew?
Geisha, Churroso, or Bone?
Yep, I silly. I it didn't affect my notes, but I had them in the wrong order. Okay, gotcha. All right. I'm starting to wonder why my. So. Okay. You ready to do some talking? We can talk and slurp at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So this is really interesting for me because we've had these coffees for a little over a month, and although I do intentionally taste my coffee when they've been rested, I most of the time are tasting the coffees when they're fresher than is ideal. So because at the roaster, we tend to taste it when we roast it. We tend to taste it the next day. We tend to taste it over several days, and then sometimes we save a sample that will taste over 2, 3, 4 weeks. But the coffees definitely taste better when they've had a month of rest. And for instance, like this is the best the Darwin has tasted for me, and this is, the geisha has been tasting really nice with some rest. But before it's rested, the geisha tends to be like a little orangey, but kind of tight tasting, not very expressive. But it's much juicier now. So if you don't mind, take a slurp of Cairo, and then let's talk about that one.
Yep.
Okay, so Cairo is what somebody might call a classic geisha. It's very floral. It's clean. It's fruity. It's not big. It's not a heavy coffee, but it's a little bit delicate, but pretty. I would say the tasting notes in the bag are quite good in the sense that I definitely got some orange and some berries. Didn't get as much apricot today, but I thought the florals were quite nice, and there was a little bit of a cherry ripeness in it, which I really enjoyed. How about you, Andrew? What would you add to
Yeah,
this?
I mean, I got some of the stone fruit, I think, in the aromatics initially, but this one I think was the most balanced for me in the sense of it, like some of the acidity that I feel like when I tasted a few weeks ago was a little bit stronger, has balanced out a little bit, and some of the just like you said, I mean, all those notes I think kind of come through in a kind of real balanced, even way where I get some of the citrus, some of the berry, a lot of different fruit notes kind of mixing together, which I love. And the floral for sure kind of carries throughout the cup.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think this one had the most balance. It was a nice balance of fruit, acid, florality. Kind of like an all-arounder. It really no weak spots. Maybe not the most expressive coffee you've ever had in your life, but it's it really has no weaknesses to me. Okay. Let's talk about Ruby, the churroso. When it was hot, I got a little bit of a pleasant bubblegum sort of flavor, which I was surprised by because that's something that often happens with more processy coffees. And this Ruby is very much a classic washed coffee I think the processing touch was rather light on this coffee. Pretty zingy. The number one tasting note for us by far on Ruby is lemongrass. And I'll explain why in a minute. But there is it's not. I mean, the bag says pineapple. I'm getting something not quite pineapple, but pretty close. I found this one to be more acidic, less juicy. This has always been like a more tighter, more linear coffee. Like it's a coffee that amongst all the coffees we've roasted seems to appeal the most to my friends who buy green. And it's been a popular coffee, but it's not as popular as say something with a little bit more bombastic fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. The lemongrass for sure is the note that I get most. I think the tropical fruit kind of is undertone to that. I think this one was the strongest acidity of the three, in my opinion. Definitely a little bit more punch, which is fun. But
and I think that's why my green buying friends liked it, is that they tend to be very tuned into acid levels, and Ruby's very zesty, if you will. It's someone coffee propaganda here wrote that it tastes pretty processed to him or her. Okay, it is anaerobic, so I could see like someone feeling like it's a little processy. I've never really like overly processed or anything like that has never really been in my cupping notes for the coffee. So the reason it smells of lemongrass is it's not co-fermented or anything like that, but they dry it on drying patios with lemongrass under the coffee beans. So it's an interesting technique that, you know, it's in that gray area of, well, what are you going to call that? I don't really know. But I personally, I'm a fan in the sense that the effect of that is very subtle, but clean and clear. Like there's lemongrass, but it's not off-putting, at least to me. It's not like some co-ferments or some infused coffees just get weird. It's like, why is there coconut on top of my coffee flavors, kind of thing, right? So anyway, yeah. So Wilder Lasso, who processes this coffee, I went to Ruby. I was at the farm 3 days ago, and he chooses like a 36-hour classic washed protocol, but then they dry it on the lemongrass to give it a little bit interesting aroma. And I tasted, actually, at his cupping table the other day, I tasted this exact coffee, not dried on lemongrass, and it was pretty similar. It was basically like the same coffee, missing that lemongrass note. I would say I preferred the lemongrass one a little bit more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do feel like the anaerobic washed process, which is even that can be kind of gray and pretty broad in what it comes. But that, when I've seen that on bags and talked to producers and stuff, that seems like a good balance of like you kind of get a lot of the core characters of like washed coffee, but a little bit more punch maybe that starts to bring. But I agree. I don't feel like this one is overly processed. I mean, especially when, I don't know, I feel like I've tasted a lot of like really processed coffee.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like the funkier naturals or anything like that. And anaerobics, I would say 5 to 10 years ago, almost every anaerobic I tasted was kind of weird, kind of sour, kind of weird, kind of aggressive in some way. And I think the process has evolved, and most people have kind of figured out how to do it in a way that does exactly what you said. It makes the fruit punchier, but it keeps it clean, which is really nice. Let's try Darwin. How about you take the lead on this one?
Yeah, so I would say pink. I mean, the pink Vermont varietal is one of my favorite, and in the club has been very popular. So this may have been my favorite of the three. I mean, I get definitely strong citrus, like sweet citrus, orange. I think the mandarin call you guys have makes. I mean, I get that more than stone fruit, although I see that. Very clean. I think I like pink Bourbons in general because they have that cleanliness, but also like a real depth to the flavor and the complexity. Even within like one or two calls, I feel like there's a lot of play in there. So that's what I got in this one.
Yep. For me, I got orange, peach, lemon, apricot. I got a nice pomegranate, like deep, ripe flavor. And I got a little pepperiness, which is something that often shows up in pink Bourbons. Okay, so I asked Vladimir so what we've done is we've locked the scores and averaged them. So if you refresh your screen, what you should see after refreshing is a couple of things. You'll see your scores with, at least on my screen, mine is like a purple bar. So like, for instance, in the acidity, I gave Cairo 9, Ruby 9.5, Darwin 9. Okay. And then I see the average acidity, which looks like about a 9 here. And I also see a tiny gray bar chart below that. Do you see that as well, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay, and those bars are basically the distribution of other people's scores. So, peppery as in black pepper. Yeah. So what this is telling us is where your score was versus other people's scores, and it's telling you the distribution of other scores. So sometimes you see a coffee, like for instance, if you look at the clean cup in the Darwin Pink Bourbon, you see a very big skew. You see like a block under 9.5, you see a block under 8, you see a little bit under 7. There's a pretty big spread. So we would call this polarizing. There's something about this coffee that's polarizing, where as a group, we're not in much agreement. And then there are scores like, for instance, the balance under Ruby is a pretty tight range from 8.5 to 9. everybody except for one person was 8.5 to 9. And you could say like maybe the aroma of the Darwin Pink Bourbon was like kind of concentrated around 8. So that's kind of interesting. And then you have your word cloud at the bottom. And the larger the word, the more frequently it was used. When I've done this with, say, 100 people, the word cloud becomes very, like, there's always some word that dominates for each coffee. So here it looks like for El Cairo, apricot, stone fruit, blueberry, lemongrass, citrus were pretty big. Ruby, Earl Grey, tea, potent. Interestingly, lemongrass was pretty small. And then Darwin, savory, orange, sweet, confectioner, sugar. So that's kind of interesting because you've got sort of sweet and savory as like two big notes. And less, it looks like fewer tasting words under Darwin, but more sort of sweet, 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 like things calling it sweet or similar. Yep. So and that makes sense. Like this coffee, it is juicy, right? It's got a certain it's not as, I mean, it's interesting. The clean cup on that was kind of all over the map. I thought it was quite clean. But the really what stood out with that coffee was it was maybe a less defined set of flavors than the others, but it was just plump and ripe and juicy for people.
Yeah.
Anyway, any questions, comments, anything anybody wants to text in now that we've locked all the scores? Feel free to contribute. Do you have a favorite, Andrew?
You know, I think this morning the Pink Bourbon was probably my favorite. I think in the truthfully, I've loved all. I mean, I've tried these throughout, kind of as they've rested more. I tried, I think, the Ruby at SCA, and that one I think stood out there in the midst of like a bunch of other coffees, just something very unique. So I do feel like I've cupped these a few times. I've tried them individually. I like this set because I feel like my favorite kind of evolves based on the day, and I don't know how the coffee rested or just how I brewed it, but I think today the Pink Bourbon was hitting for me.
Excellent. Yeah, the Pink Bourbon showed really well today. Ruby, I don't know. In the past, I would say if my average cup of Ruby was better than my average cup of these other two, but Ruby today didn't shine for me. And the Cairo is interesting because we drifted just a little lighter in our Cairo roast a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's really starting to show well with the ever so slightly lighter roast. And I've been pretty happy with that. We bought a bunch of Cairo and stuck it in our freezer, so we've been using it for a variety of things for a few months because we defrost a couple of bags, a couple of vac sealed bags every week. So
nice. Yeah, I saw that that's on. You have an espresso roast of that now, which would be
I had a sort of accidental, slightly darker roast that was just like a couple of points outside of our color target, and I pulled a shot of it and loved it, and I thought, okay, like let's do a geisha espresso because it really popped really well as espresso. So
yeah, some of these like nicer coffees, I guess I don't do on espressos as much, but when you do, they can be real special.
I tend to not use them as espresso either, especially if they're expensive, because you might be dialing in and throwing away a shot or two. But sometimes it's kind of fun to just try something completely different for espresso. So awesome. Well, thank you for setting this up and participating, and thanks to everyone at home for playing along.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a link to this, right? I know there's a bunch of people that weren't able to make it this morning, and we're planning to watch afterwards. I think it'll be can they still do the scoring even after? Obviously, it won't have the group, but
that's the only thing. I mean, they can score on their own, but their scores, of course, won't contribute to the exactly. So it's they can. I'll send you a link for the saved presentation. And anybody who does this later on without it being live, they'll have the same experience. It'll seem like it's live. They just the scoring won't work the same. So
yep, that works. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks, Scott, for doing this. This was really fun. I appreciate it. Hopefully everyone who watching will enjoy it. And thanks for these coffees. They were great.
All right. Thanks. Take care. Have a great day.
Sounds good. Yeah, see you guys.